I remained in an unhappy marriage for 3 years to support my kids. But now that I've moved on, my in-laws are punishing them whenever they spend time with me. I was married to my ex-wife for over 20 years, and we have 2 children together, a 22-year-old son and a 20-year-old daughter. For the majority of our marriage, things were fairly balanced. We both contributed equally to housework and childcare responsibilities, and we took turns being stay-at-home parents. She was at home with our son, and I stayed home with both our son and daughter for over a year each. We always had agreements about dividing tasks, and communication between us was generally good. However, things started to change when my oldest son entered high school, and my wife took on a new job that was both demanding and required frequent travel. This job changed the dynamics of our household. Her new role required 50% travel, meaning I had to handle most of the household duties about 2 weeks per month. When she was home, she didn't contribute as much as she had in the past. At first, I tried to be accommodating, understanding her job's challenges. We even tried redistributing the housework and chores to better fit her new schedule, but much of the responsibility ended up falling on me. I did my best to balance everything, but it became increasingly difficult as time passed. When the pandemic began, the situation worsened. I tried to just endure it, believing the lockdowns would be temporary, but when things opened back up, the imbalance continued. I proposed counseling as a solution, hoping it would help us work through our issues. Unfortunately, my wife missed many sessions and didn't fully commit to the process. It became clear that our marriage was struggling, and I eventually reached the point where I wanted a divorce. The timing was not ideal. Our son was preparing to go to college after having his freshman year conducted remotely due to the pandemic, which was a logistical and financial challenge. Additionally, my daughter was struggling with depression, and I had become her main support system since my wife was often away for work. I made the decision to wait until my daughter was in a better emotional state and our financial situation was more stable before filing for divorce. During this period, I continued to do my best as a single parent, handling the challenges on my own for 3 years. I brought up counseling again several times, but my wife insisted that things were fine and refused to attend. Our marriage lacked intimacy, and during one summer, she spent 6 weeks working in North Carolina, returning home only on weekends. Once my daughter had settled into her sophomore year of college and was feeling more stable, I felt it was time to make the final decision. I liquidated some of my stock investments to create a trust for my kids' college education, ensuring they would be taken care of financially. Then I filed for divorce. Initially, my wife was furious, but when she returned from North Carolina a few weeks later, she said she wanted to work things out. I told her I had made my decision years ago, and I wasn't interested in reconciling. We eventually reached an agreement through mediation and had an amicable divorce. Now my children live with me, and they support me. However, my in-laws, as well as much of my extended family except my sister, believe I am the one at fault. They think I should have pushed harder for counseling earlier, divorced sooner, or communicated more clearly with my wife about how important it was to me. Some have even called me selfish, and a few of my in-laws refuse to interact with my kids when they're at my house. For example, my daughter FaceTimed her grandmother once, and the moment she saw my daughter was at my house, she hung up. Things also became tense at my son's graduation when my in-laws made a scene. They demanded that he choose between celebrating with them or with me, rather than having dinner together as a group. I encouraged my son to go with them, and we had our own celebration afterward. But something happened during their dinner, and my son ended up living with me, almost cutting off contact with his maternal side. I honestly believe I did what was best for my kids, but now I feel like their mother's family is punishing them for my decision. I'm starting to feel like a terrible father, as if my actions are causing harm to my children. I admit that I could have been more direct and assertive when addressing issues in my marriage, but at the time it felt like the problem was bigger than just the two of us. Looking back, I think my lack of courage in addressing our issues earlier has made the situation harder for my kids. But at the same time, I believe I made the right choice by prioritizing their well-being over my own feelings. Even if I had to do it all over again, I would still make the same decision. The response to my original post has been overwhelming. I received a lot of feedback, both positive and negative, that has helped me gain perspective on the situation. A few points have come up repeatedly in the comments, so I want to clarify them. When my wife took her new job, our financial situation was solid, but the increase in her salary from $80,000 to $140,000 allowed us to go from just saving for an emergency fund to having enough to cover our children's college expenses. We both worked in tech, but her role was with a defense contractor, and her work required her to be on site in a different location from where we lived. At first, she planned to stay in the high travel role for a while and later transferred to a position closer to home. However, as she was promoted, the option to move near us became unavailable unless she took a significant pay cut. When we divorced, I was earning about $280,000 and she was making slightly over $300,000, so there was no alimony and we didn't face many complications in dividing assets. We sold off our home, which was the only major asset that didn't divide easily, and we had enough funds to move forward. I've seen many comments suggesting suggesting infidelity as the reason for our divorce, but I truly don't believe that was the case. My wife and I were both busy with work and life, and while her job took her away frequently, she was not unfaithful or hiding anything. I also want to clarify that when I said the divorce was amicable, I meant it in a legal sense. We went through mediation, and the process was uncontested. While we didn't end our marriage as friends, we were able to settle things in a civil manner. Some commenters questioned why my ex's family would have such a strong reaction and why my kids supported me if the divorce was amicable. The answer lies in the emotional disconnect my wife had from our family in the years leading up to the divorce. She wasn't abusive or overtly mean, but she wasn't really present either. She missed important events, didn't engage with the kids' interests, and often wasn't home due to her job. When my in-laws started taking sides and saying hurtful things about me, the kids pushed back. That's when they chose to live with me. It's been a few months since I made the original post, and things have started improving. I received much-needed support and also constructive criticism, which I've taken to heart. I've been working on mending relationships, particularly with my family, and while I don't expect to be friends with my ex or her family, I'm glad to see things getting better. I don't regret the divorce, but I do wish I hadn't waited as long as I did. What I've learned is that it's better to end a marriage when it's truly over, rather than maintaining a facade for years.